How's it going today, Jordan? I saw y'all got a little bit of snow yesterday.
We did. It was very beautiful. And by the end of the day, it was blue skies and gorgeous and all gone.
That's the best part about Colorado late summer.
Absolutely.
How's it going today, Jordan? I saw y'all got a little bit of snow yesterday. All right, we are live streaming, everyone.
Better stop. I have additional participant to the meeting. Oh, sorry, Jonathan. These Zoom meetings are a challenge with house pets. I think she's settled. Oh my.
So Tracy, I have a 22-year-old cat, and
Yes.
it will walk across the screen at my desk, and you'll just see the tail.
Oh, well,
Oh, there's the tail.
nice. Not feeling so bad then.
I think we all need pets to keep us,
Same. These times,
Yes, yes.
wholeheartedly agree.
Oh, Jack. Hey, Barb, we have a waitress in town that's worked at Marion's for like 35 years. She plays cat daycare, I guess, because my neighbor also has a 22-year-old cat, but it goes down to Riverside Drive to Kathy's house all day and hangs out like at her house. And only in the evening, the owners of the neighbors will go down and carry that back home. It's like an evening ritual. Shocking that I guess she just loves cats because she puts up with it.
Well, people ask me how come the cat's been alive for so long. I said, well, I think at 15 or 20, I stopped taking her to the vet.
Maybe I honestly did not know cats lived that long until my neighbors told me that he had it since he was 14 years old.
Wow. Yeah, well, this cat also hunts.
There he is. And
So did it get toasty up there today?
not bad. I think low 80s.
Don't say nothing, Andy. Changing up my background again.
I think it's.
How's everybody doing this evening?
Good.
So it's not Monday night. Who's running this meeting? It's Wednesday night. Cindy, it's a Cindy be running it.
Well, let's just hope that Cindy joins us. Otherwise, you're the default mayor.
I talked to her before we left work. She is planning on being here.
Okay.
Traffic was kind of bad though coming down, so
I forgot you had to work with Cindy. I mean, that you work with Cindy. How you doing, Don? Good to see you.
Hello. Yeah, I'm here with the cat.
Mike, good to see you on. Is Nina supposed to be on, Andy?
I think
I just talked to her. I'm pretty sure she's in the process of logging in right now.
And you do have it streaming, right? John?
We are live right now. There's Nina.
Hello.
Hi, Nina.
Hey, Mayor.
Jim, can you hear us yet?
I can hear you. You asking someone else?
Yeah, we can hear. You can hear good.
Yes, thank you. You never know with these things.
Yeah, we might get a little snow next week.
Wow.
Tuesday.
5.
And then I think it's supposed to get back up to 80.
Yeah, something like that.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi. Am I on?
You are
Yeah.
Cindy.
Hey, cool.
Well, your finger was.
hi, Cindy.
Let's see, we're missing Bob, John Curtis. Can you hear us, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We'll give just another couple of minutes and then we're gonna get started. Planning, who are we missing from planning? Kate?
Ursula.
I think Kate had a prior engagement, and then I will resend to Ursula just to make sure she's got the invite.
All right, let's get started. Thanks everybody for being here. Tuesday night. The discussion we had last week. I'm losing the weeks here. So in our packets, first I'd like to, I'm sure everybody knows, but I want to welcome Tracy Stokes. She was appointed to our, as an alternate. So
Thank you.
so this is a follow-up. In our packets, there are some a couple of community what they're doing. I hope everybody got a chance to look at it. So we had a meeting with Barb, Andy and I, and John. Was John there? Were you there, John? And Nina was on, and we had a discussion about how this thing might move forward. We got a lot of good input. We started talking about a survey and things like that. We felt, oh, Cindy was on that call too, that, you know, another survey going out at the time, we're ready to get something. I don't know if another survey that would go out would help us. So with that, I'm going to open it up. Who is going to take the lead?
So Jonathan's going to put the slideshow up. I'm going to facilitate the meeting. I don't know, Mayor, if you want to keep things moving along or how you want to do it, or the role that you and Cindy want to play.
Let's just kind of run through it and, open up if somebody has a question, let's just raise hand and ask questions. How the presentation, let's just do that. Let's just make it really formal and open discussion.
Okay, so just by way of introduction, this is the second work session, and this particular work session is specific to what was discussed at the last work session, which is the concept of inclusionary housing. But I'm going to give you a little bit of background for those of you that were not on last time. So the intent of this joint work session is to obtain policy direction.
Meeting over.
I love those short meetings.
Yes,
Can you
they're
see
great.
it now? I don't know what just happened there. Is it showing crop or the way it's showing? Okay.
Yeah. So the intent of this work session is to obtain policy direction to move forward with an inclusionary housing ordinance. And then in addition, we want to know if there are any additional strategies to provide more housing options within the city. But the main focus of tonight is really on the inclusionary housing ordinance. So just again, as way of background, currently these are 2018 statistics. In 2018, there were 983 occupied housing units. 554 were owner occupied. 429 were renter occupied, and the average household size for owner occupied is 2 people per unit, renter 1.8. I just want everybody to know in the Denver metro area, that's a very low household size. If you went up to where John Bordoni spends the weekend, you'd be looking at probably 3.2 persons per household. So next slide, John. So again, just further breakdown of the 983 household, 595 were families. And again, family is a much broader definition than it used to be. So of those 595, 441 were married couples, and then 388 were non-family households. So this is something Nina will be addressing, but again, when you start talking about inclusionary housing, HUD and most municipalities in Colorado, if they want to get into the attainable housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever you want to call it, you look at the area median income. So the area median income, as we went over last time, is about $48,000. So the consensus based on the survey of planning commissioners and city council is that everyone agreed there was a need for low-income individuals and families. That's where people felt there was not enough housing. They were particularly concerned about people that work in the community, public sector, service, industry, workforce, senior citizens, and renters in general. One person, and I thought this was an interesting statistic, is the service industry workers and teachers make up almost half of the Idaho Springs population. So again, when we talk about who we're trying to house, we're not trying to house necessarily you know, the low end of the housing continuum, but really the people that make up your community and work in your community. So last time we showed a policy framework where we talked about preservation, protection, inclusion, some sort of revenue generation, incentives, property acquisition. So tonight, what we're really talking about is a strategy to ensure that a share of new development is affordable. So we're going to be talking about how much of a share should be affordable. Next slide, Jonathan. So as we went, and then I'm going to turn this over to Nina, but I just want to remind people that you have two sections of your municipal code currently. You have section 2176, which basically allows the city to enact an impact fee. We then have 2177, which is actually titled inclusionary housing. And this was sort of, talking to Carmen, put in as sort of a holding place. And so the code reads, the city may require a certain percentage of affordable units to be set aside or establish fees in lieu thereof. Requirements will be set by city council and implemented as part of the development impact fee schedule. I do want to remind everybody that you currently have one development impact fee, and that is a traffic impact fee imposed at subdivision. So if somebody was going to subdivide a piece of property, say they had a larger tract, they would pay $5,000 per residential unit, or if it was commercial, $2,500 per parking space. To our knowledge, and in checking with the city clerk, this fee has never been imposed on anyone in the city. The fee was put in place in 2006. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Nina, and she is going to go through what an inclusionary housing ordinance is. And then the task for tonight is to provide direction to staff on how do we want to move forward. And there are no wrong answers. So Nina, go for it.
Thanks, Barb. It's nice seeing everyone. I know the Planning Commission knows me really well. For the City Council, I work for Carmen Beery, who you know very well, and I advise the Planning Commission. That's something I typically do. I have a background in land use and zoning, and I actually teach on these issues to University of Denver. Anyway, at our last meeting, we spoke about that there are many tools in the toolbox to deal with the housing issues that Idaho Springs faces. And through that discussion, we came to the conclusion that one tool that we can quickly implement is an inclusionary housing ordinance. And like Barb said, the goal of today is to get the policy direction generally from you all to then draft an ordinance. And when we say draft an ordinance, then it's going to be on first reading in front of council. So everything, definitively doesn't need to be decided, but I feel that it's a very good idea, and it's very realistic that at the end of this meeting, hearing what everyone says on the certain policy questions that we'll ask, we can draft that ordinance for your review. And then you can feel like you have an actual product. And then after that discussion, there's other options that you can consider, but we can, move this forward and then, in the same time, deal with all the other issues. So in the packet, I had included the inclusionary ordinance I drafted for another city I represent, which is Salida. So that's what you see in the packet when you see the actual ordinance. Also an article in Denver Post about that same ordinance. And then also an FAQ from Longmont, their website. They have an inclusionary housing ordinance. I thought it was good to show that mix. So again, the goal after this meeting for certain points, that's what I'm gonna focus on in this PowerPoint, and then kind of put them in the legalese and then present to you. So what is inclusionary housing? We should start with the basics. It's a requirement that all new residential development for sale or for rent, or whatever type of development you decide, contribute a certain percent of their housing units to be permanently affordable, quote unquote, to households earning a certain percent of the area median income. And if you see that X and that Y, that's what we're going to talk about in subsequent slides, where you're going to give a little feedback as to what you feel. How should you even do this? I think that a lot of you were even talking today because you believe this is a good solution, but how much percentage, what type of housing, what percentage of the total housing unit should be this inclusionary housing? What kind of income are we trying to keep in our city for our workforce? So possible purposes and objectives, we want to, housing goals of our city comprehensive plan, we want to actually start address, I mean, you are starting to address them, but actually, take those next steps. Speak to your workforce. That's what, last meeting, that was the big concern. Many communities are facing this, but you want to keep your workforce here and keep the people who are here. You said your aging population, keep them in the city, and balance that community for all income levels. A good community like you have here in Idaho Springs has a good balance of all different types of income, education levels, that kind of thing. So we can have the next slide. So these are the first two questions that we'll open up to get your feedback. So the first is, what should trigger the requirement to provide affordable units? Meaning, in this inclusionary housing ordinance, it'll say these type of developments must have a set aside for a certain amount of units for inclusionary housing. So I just wrote down different developments in Idaho Springs. Is it everything? Is it, planned developments, annexations, subdivisions, or just any new residential structure? And I'll let you answer, but then the next question is, well, I want to explain it. What is also the thresholds for how many housing units are built? So for example, is this requirement that we're going to put upon developers or builders, when is that going to be triggered? Is it going to be if they build 5 units, 50, 2? We kind of got a lot people saying all different types of answers last time. So we wanted to narrow that down. So the first question is, what type of development, and again, this is all new, it's nothing that has already been built. What type of new development or application should we, when they come into the city, say, we have this requirement in the code that a certain percentage of your units must be set aside for this workforce housing?
Tina, just a question. Would you like me to facilitate answers to these slides, or do you want to go through your entire presentation first?
I would like to answer the questions now. And
Okay,
Good.
I think they would be, it's fresh on everybody's mind, and I think we could probably run through it pretty quick.
Okay.
yeah, and I'll take notes because I'll be drafting the ordinance, and obviously we both will, but yeah, that would be great, Barb, thank you.
Okay, so so in terms of planned developments, you have you don't have a lot of those. Annexations, there'll be a new annexation. I mean, you had the Argo annexation. There's another one that the Planning Commission knows about, which is the Betts annexation. The other option is major or minor subdivisions. Again, there's sort of a funny wrinkle in your code where people can do boundary surveys, so they're missing the subdivision step. But again, if you go with major and minor subdivisions, you also need to keep in mind that anybody that's going to be subdividing their property will also be paying, that is, if it's residential, that $5,000 per unit, which is a pretty heavy hit. And then the other question is, any new residential structures requiring final development plan approval? And
So can I just clarify, Barbara? So I think maybe, or you could tell me if you disagree, but kind of, I know this is getting up maybe too hyper technical, but the last question is kind of a catch-all, like, or I meant it as, how do people feel? Should it be just all new development or just these specific types of development? So it's not like one or the other. It's kind of like their general feeling, like where they want to go with this. Do they want it to be
So-
specific or everything?
And I wanted to clarify with final development plans in Idaho Springs. And we have a project that has not been submitted yet, but 50% of the site is already built. They're going to build a little bit less than 50%. They are going to be building what they're calling affordable units, but they do not need to go in front of planning commission or city council because you have a 50% rule. So that will be dealt with administratively. So let's take the first question. So it's really what's going to trigger the need to provide units, either physically provide a unit or pay a fee in lieu of. Discussion.
Definitely any multifamily units.
Yeah.
Of course, then we would have to decide, and it's going to be further down, the minimum of number of housing. You know, we'll have to determine whether we want any more than 30, this goes into effect. And the reason I've thought this out, so the developer buys a small piece of property with 12 units, and we require, 2 of those units to be affordable housing. I'm not sure the numbers could work out for them. So we've got to think of a number that's a number of units that's going to.
So wouldn't it apply to all types of development? And then we come up with what's the minimum number of housing units. I think that's the direction Nina was going, wasn't it, Nina? That you pick the number.
Yeah, I figured we go for the first one and the second one. I think the first one, it's not like, let's go into the nitty gritty about these, annexation, this and that. If the general consensus is that any multifamily development should trigger it as to the development, then we can move on to how many. And again, this could be changed when we go to the ordinance, but just a general sense. My sense is that from your conversation last time is that you feel, any development, and then we can get into the nitty gritty like at another time. But if that's what you guys want, if we're reading that correctly, we'll write that in a certain way. And then I think what's most important is probably that next question, the number of housing units that trigger it. But of course, let me know if I'm wrong in that sense.
And I just really, and Cindy, you'll be good to answer, I guess, so Cindy, just to repeat, Cindy said all types of development. So Cindy, are you okay if you had a small piece of property and because the property had easements, mining claim, you were forced to do a minor subdivision, even though it was under an acre of land? Are you okay with that?
Well, but that feeds into the number of units issue.
Yeah, I think that we should get, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we should ask people.
I guess to answer Barb's question, one of the questions I have for Nina is, can a developer request a variance on this ordinance?
We'll get it. No, not a variance, but we'll get on to later on. After we go into the threshold, I go into the different options. So I offer at least 4 different options that they can meet, that it doesn't include the housing units. So it's a fee in lieu, but we'll go into that when we get there. So I think I think it's going to address your question.
So if
Nina, didn't you say last time it's pretty normal that like 5 units or more, like that's something you've seen?
5 units or more is a lot of places have 5 units or more.
And it makes sense because anything over 4 units is a commercial loan. So 5 actually makes a lot of sense. And I've seen a lot of communities had good luck with 15% set aside for affordable. One of the examples that you sent us, I thought was a very good idea, where it could be 15%, well, it was 12.5%, I believe,
Right.
side. But at 80% of AMI, that counted as a unit. At 60% of AMI, it counted as 2 units. Well, that
Right.
was a really good idea. It allows for a mix of affordability within a new residential development.
Yeah, we have a lot of success in our in other cities that I work with, where they say we kind of negotiate and they say, well, this development is more suited for that 60% AMI, and the developer's happy because then they have a different type of. So I think that's what Cindy was getting at, this flexibility. So yeah, a lot of places do over 5. I wrote that any multifamily unit development over 5.
Okay, so in terms of what types of development, do we have other comments, concerns, ideas?
I mean, really any development that results in 5 or more housing units, it doesn't really matter what kind.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just, so what I'm hearing is that people are less concerned about the type of development application and more concerned about the number of units,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a consensus. So I think we can move on to the next
Okay.
questions.
Well, I have one more question with regard to this.
And I got
So we have been talking about the inclusionary rule applying so far just to residential development. Do you also want that to apply to commercial development?
I wouldn't recommend that right now. I think what I see is if they're gonna do residential, they put a part of that. Sorry, I'm echoing. I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay, anybody else have any thoughts?
a question. So we're talking about, so are we talking, is this going to be 2 different categories from rental units and purchase units?
It would apply to both. So that's a good question, actually, if everyone agrees with that, that if it applies to both rental and for purchase. I recommend most places, if you're going to do this, it's for both.
So you
I would definitely say both.
everything for both?
I'm sorry?
You say the same number of units and everything for both?
Yes. So if it's like, let's say they're doing a development, let's say they're doing a subdivision or any type of development there, and there's like 10 single family homes that, well, let's say 8, then 1 would be set aside for purchase for what that means for someone from those from that income level, what they could afford. And then it's both would be deed restricted. So most of these are for sale and for rental. And I think that that's a good idea, because then you have a blend of what's in your community. And obviously people who purchase, feel more invested in the community.
Okay,
So that would only be 10% then, 1 house out of 10.
Well, we'll
No,
go into
just
how much you guys,
like-
what like percentage you want to do, but if it's 12, right, if it's, so let's say it's 10 units and your thing says 10%, it would be 1. If you do 12.5%, that's 1 out of every 8.
and if you
And
did
that-
if you did 5 units, you're basically 1 unit is 20% of your project.
Right, so you'd either do 1 unit or you would do the other options that we'll talk about later, how you could, it's, the ordinances are so drafted for flexibility, and we'll see if you guys agree with all the different options of how they could meet their requirement. That doesn't
Right.
include.
So you could pay a predetermined amount to buy
Yes,
a fraction of a unit.
correct.
Now, Nina, I know it's a technicality, but in the Salida ordinance, if you're at a fraction, it rolls to a full unit. Correct?
Yeah, but it depends because the other options. So if they usually don't go to that full unit, they'll do something
Correct,
else. So
correct.
it's all flexible. Yeah. So
Well, I kind of like that 10%.
10%. Oh, that's another question. We'll go to another slide. But that's
Okay,
good to know.
I have a question, and because this part is all new to me.
Yeah.
When you have a builder come in, you make him or her make 1 house more affordable or 2 houses more affordable. Does that not add the cost to the other houses? Because we all know that the developer is going to make X number of dollars. So isn't that kind of burdening the people who are not in the low income or
Yeah.
the workforce? And
Yeah.
is that equitable to those people?
So I think Art's question is spot on. So again, whenever you do any type of impact fee or an inclusionary housing ordinance, you're intervening in the market. So yes, and there's.
So yeah, I don't disagree and what you're trying to say. It's just the questions we're asking are, if we're going to go forward with an inclusionary housing ordinance, what details would you guys want to see in that draft ordinance? Then I think when it's proposed, that there can be that discussion. But this is just to help us put a draft together that will then be in front of you. So if you were to consider an inclusionary housing ordinance, what are these like points would you want in it? So that I know what to draft to put in front of you for your first reading and then consideration.
But I think let's zoom in on the question. So the question is the minimum number of housing units. So if I am going to build 10 units, then if that's the trigger, then I have to do something for affordable housing. If I only do 5 units, then we don't need to do it. I want to remind people that in the survey, of which the Planning Commission, thank you, Cindy, did the best job responding to it. It was very interesting that most people responding to the survey felt that a 3 to 6 unit development was a good fit for the city. So the question would be, do you want to go to 5 units and make me do something that affordable?
I thought we had decided on 5.
Well, I heard the mayor say 10.
No, he said 10%.
So we said 10% set aside. So I'm following what everyone's saying and I'm writing it down. If anyone, I guess it's a good point to see if anyone thinks 3 or, but it sounded 5. But again, those numbers we could always change once we draft the ordinance. But of course, everyone could speak at this point. But
So maybe 8's a good number.
Well, to what the mayor is speaking to, if it's 10%, how do you trigger at 5 if it's 10%?
so let's do the percentage if we don't mind, because I outlined it like all the questions if we don't mind. Later on, we say what percentage. So we could always say, like, let's go back to the number. That's actually a good point. Maybe we put a pin in 5 and then we go to the percentage. When we get to the percentage, we kind of circle back to the amount of units. Is that a good idea?
Yes.
Okay.
I would recommend 10 units would trigger it. I mean, that's just my recommendation. I don't know how we're going to get a consensus and a raise your hand. We'll probably have to go back to a full screen to get everybody.
And then again, Mayor, I think
I'd like to hear from others and what they're thinking.
yeah, and but definitely I don't want them to feel nervous, like they're kind of like you guys are getting yourself locked in. It's kind of general feelings, and then you can talk more at the next meeting. But yeah, definitely everyone can share what they're thinking.
But the trigger in terms of when do I need, as a developer or builder, somebody that owns property, I think that the most important question, just so we can move forward, is what is that trigger where all of a sudden the inclusionary housing ordinance applies? So
Yes.
Jordan,
Some people said 5, some people said 10. People could throw out if they other numbers.
Okay.
I feel like 10 is a good number for me.
Okay, why don't we just
I
go
like
around?
5.
Let's go around the room. Okay, so Scott, you're 10, Mike?
Yes.
10, Art,
5.
5.
I think 5
Yeah,
also.
I'm here, I feel 10 is a reasonable one to start talking about.
Okay, so Lou is 10.
No, Lou is-
Tracy,
10.
10. Chuck,
I'm in the minority. I feel 5.
No, I'm with you, Chuck.
Well,
Okay,
we said,
Jan?
as far as the survey said 3 to 6, so.
Yeah, so
Jeff?
that's right in there. But did anybody answer my question? Did I miss something as far as the cost factor of the low housing being, the cost factor being tacked on to the rest of the development?
So if you just mean, yes, Art, sorry, if you just mean generally in terms of like how the developer calculates their costs, I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's just more of a whether you even do this type of ordinance or not. And I'm not, we're not trying to push policy either way, but what we're goals is if we're going to have this inclusionary housing ordinance and we think it's important enough to yes, put an extra cost on the developer, how are we going to write that ordinance? But that doesn't mean, again, this is before it's even presented to you for first reading to even consider whether or not you want to go that route.
Well, my concern wasn't the developer's cost. It was the developer coming in with a set profit margin that he or she needs to meet. And that profit margin is going to be met somewhere. So if he gives reductions on the lower end, he has to charge the other people. That's all I'm saying. So aren't you raising the cost when you do something like that to the person that's not getting a low income housing?
I mean, yes and no, because a lot of times they can't, there's only a certain amount they could charge. So there's usually a market rate that they're going to charge. I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree. But on the other hand, they're only going to go so high because otherwise they won't rent those other units out. They're probably going to try to rent them out at market rate. If they're going to rent them out over market rate and over what the going rate is, then they're not going to get anybody, they're not going to get the occupancy they need. So
well, okay. Okay.
But I don't disagree with where you're going. I understand it's kind of like maybe it'll go up a little higher, but not the same amount because it's all a calculation of all the different factors. But there's only so much they could charge.
The ending factor is profitability. Otherwise, they're not going to build. Right. And my question is this where in this ordinance would we determine the percent of rentals compared to rentals ownership that we want in this community, or is that somewhere else?
Somewhere else, because this is just saying that you guys are determining, when there's going to be development and and units being built, whether they're for sale or for rent. You're saying if 10 or 5 are built, it's going to trigger this requirement to set aside. That's the only thing that this ordinance will do is make that requirement.
Okay, I'm trying to just take a straw vote. So Jim Clark, what's your sense, number of units? You're on mute.
So has anybody determined the percentage of people that need?
We don't know that.
Yeah. Well, let me just take, I just want to just simply take a straw vote on number of units. Jim?
Yeah, so I initially said 10. That may change with more education that I get on this.
Okay. Don, did you vote yet?
I'm going with 5.
Okay.
But has anybody figured what percentage of the workers need affordable housing?
Yeah, good question. Shouldn't that be determined up front, guys? Great question.
Oh, someone's echoing. I think that when you say percentage, it's you guys have determined that there's a need for housing. I mean, this is one of many tools. I mean, this is going to put a dent in what you need. So if it's not like if you have 10% of people right now who need housing, you should do 10% of inclusionary housing because it's only new development. This is just one of many tools to use. Maybe when we get to I think that even if you guys did even if you did an inclusionary housing requirement of 25% of all units, you're still probably not totally solving your housing needs, but it's just kind of to put a dent in it. But
yeah, so, and let's just remember that the occupancy rate in Idaho Springs is at 95%. So no matter where you are on the housing continuum, there's not a lot of housing. But I want to get Bob Boland, what's your sense?
10% I had mentioned before. I think that's a good discussion.
10% or 10 units?
10 units.
Okay. Ursula?
I kind of want to say 2 right now because, you know, we need a lot of housing. But I like Nina's concept on going through this and then going back and revise our numbers.
Okay.
Just remove the percentage.
Cindy, I don't think I got you.
I would say at this point, let's start with 10.
Okay. Okay. Did I get everybody? Okay, let's move on to the next slide.
So other questions that we would need policy direction on, in addition to what triggers it, what even brings the developer in for this requirement, is what income level do we want to ensure has some of this housing? So typically, like I said last time, these ordinances are between either 60 or 80% of the area median income. So in the ordinance, it would say that, again, any new development that has X percent of units must have these units set aside for sale or for rent for people who make this amount of the area median income, and that those units will be charged for what that range of area median income can spend. And my next slide will show a chart to try to explain that. But for example, in Idaho Springs, your area median income is almost $48,000. So 80% of that, I did the math before, I think it's 38, hold on, 48 times 0.8. Yes, 38,500 would be 80% area median income. So that means that that person could not make more than that amount. Now it depends on whether you guys, I don't think it'll be hard to use the Idaho Springs area median income for this ordinance because that's not always tracked. The way that HUD tracks it every single year is the Denver metro area, which your county is part of, which right now is 65% is that area median income. So actually, Jonathan, can we go to the next slide and then we'll go back because I want to explain what I'm talking about. Okay, so this puts things in a more perspective. So your ordinance, I believe, should follow what is on HUD because that's going to be objective and that's what's going to, we know is going to last every single year. So this is the 2019 chart for what they call the Denver metro area, which Clear Creek County is looped within. So 100% AMI is 65,000. So if your ordinance said that you want to set aside those units for people making 60% AMI, it would be that 39,000. If you were to say 80% AMI, that would be 52,000 would be the income. So the person would need to provide proof that they make within that range. So let's say we're doing 60% AMI. That would mean they need to prove that they're making $39,000, which I believe Jonathan told me is what teachers are making right now in Clear Creek County. If you move on to, go down onto the chart, that means that the 1-bedroom rent cannot be over $1,044. Now, remember, Jonathan explained the last time that this is calculated 30% of your annual income. I know it's a lot of numbers. Housing is your housing cost, which is rent and utilities, is, if it's affordable, it's 30% of your gross income. So this is calculated every year by HUD for not every county, every region. So this kind of gives you an idea that if we're going to have, again, the 60% requirement, it would be the 39,000, and the 1-bedroom could not be more than that amount. If you guys choose 80,000, which some places have 60, some places have 80, it would be that other number I said, 52,000. So that would be, and again, that's one person. If you start having the 2%, 4%, that's a whole family. This is what they need to establish. So hopefully that'll give some explanation. If we go back, then I can explain, go back to the questions.
Yeah, the other figure that might be helpful is that 67% of the city's population makes less than 75,000 per year. So that goes back to Art's question, and is there a need? So again, 67% make less than 75,000 per year currently.
So then if we go back to the slide previously, sorry, Jonathan, I think
before you go back, the two-person rent would go up quite a bit to 1741, right? Or to, what about
You would not do,
1254?
you wouldn't do 100% of the area median income? That
No,
you would,
that's 60%, I'm sorry.
yeah. So 60% would be go from, yeah, so that means you'd have if you have two people making $44,000 or less, and then if they're having a 1-bedroom, they still could be in a 1-bedroom. They can't charge more than 1,000. And then if it's a 2-bedroom, no more than 1,200.
Okay, so I've done a lot of research about this. Should we focus on this number, on the price real quick? I've pulled every job opening in the county, just about, to check to see what the starting wages are. And this AMI is really, really skewed from what the service industry people are making. As you guys noticed on your survey last time, 35% of the county is making less than $34,000. And the most of the jobs in the county right now are starting between $13 and $18 an hour, which means they make between $26,000 and $36,000 a year. And if we want to be inclusionary housing, those are the people we're targeting, service industry employees. People that start at the school that aren't teachers start between $13 an hour and $18 an hour, 21 if they're a mechanic. But I mean, these are the people we're targeting as service industry.
That's helpful, Jordan. So to further explain what you're saying, that I think that means that, well, if everyone agrees with you, then you would be looking at the 60% AMI versus the 80%. Because if you're saying 60%, you would say that the person cannot make more than 39,000. So then you'd be included all the people who make up until that amount. And then the cost would be that $1,000 bedroom. And again, these numbers would not be in the ordinance. The ordinance would refer to this chart, which is annually updated based on statistical data from the federal government. So that's why it's important to be objective. But this is a good example to kind of wrap your head around. And that's really helpful, Jordan, to know that the people who work for the county and et cetera, it looks like you'd be around that 60% AMI. So that when we do go back to the previous slides, ask questions, see if everyone is on board with that's the amount that you're trying to attract to your city or stay in your city to make sure that those units are set aside for that range of workers.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that because we're in the Denver metro area, it's kind of skewed where if we try to look closer, so we just want to look at these percentages of the AMI and remember that it's skewed by the Denver metro area.
And actually, that's a good point too, Jordan. I want to actually go back to your Idaho Springs AMI to make the point that I know you're making. So 48,000 is the area median income in Idaho Springs that was in the slide. So 80% AMI of Idaho Springs is actually 60% AMI of the Denver metro area. So if you're thinking that 80% is a good number based on the Idaho Springs numbers, you want to, when you say skew, that is true. You probably would want to bring it down to the 60% AMI because we will not have data Idaho Springs specific going forward. So we would need to look at the Denver area, which does make more than Idaho Springs area. So that is a good point to make when you're looking at what percentage of the AMI you want to.
Nina, the other thing about this chart too is if you look at $48,000 a year, that equals $950 in rent inclusive of utilities to not be cost burdened for the area median income in Idaho Springs. So that's still a big number for a lot of people.
Yeah, this isn't a free giveaway. This isn't like charity. This is just to make sure that your workers live in the area. $1,000 a month is still expensive, but it's to make it at least attainable.
I would like to request if I could share my screen with you guys to show you a couple of tables that I found with really good information. At least it helped me a lot to understand the medium income and what we have going on in town. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Ursula.
Can you guys see that?
No.
No.
It's the green button on the bottom.
Can you see it now?
There we go. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what I found on the needs assessments in the county. This line is what the actual median income for the AMI for the county. And I think here is very clear where you can see like the difference, you know, the gap that we have between the different service industries. And, well, the industries in the county. I think this is, I think this might be the, I don't think this is the one. I was thinking that this is maybe the information, the Art and Don were asking about the percentage. Well, it's not exactly how much housing they need per industry, but at least you can see the percentage of the industries that we have in the county. That I assume they're similar to Idaho Springs. And then I found this, which I thought was really interesting because it tells us exactly how many households, what is the supply that we have, you know, how many units do we have and how many families that need those households. So here it tells us for housing, for ownership, seems like we need 30% AMI and over 120. And then for rental, this is also very interesting. We need, you know, mostly 30, 60 and 120, which I think is really interesting. But, and this is kind of crazy. I don't know, it's kind of hard to understand, but the blue is the people that is here and the square is like the actual units that we have. And you can see that we have more people that could afford more expensive units, but they are living in, you know, in cheaper houses. So, and then we have more people living in houses that they could pay a little more as well, or less. What's the deal? See, I got confused. But anyway, I thought that these ones were really interesting tables, and I wanted to share with you guys.
And these numbers are for countywide, not just Idaho Springs, correct?
Yeah, this is countywide, and obviously this is from the last census, so we hopefully will get updated information soon.
And have it, and just again, the AMI in Clear Creek County is slightly higher than in Idaho Springs.
Right.
So I think a better way, oh, sorry, you done, Ursula?
Yeah, there you go.
If we go back to the chart, the question page, I think it was 11, Jonathan. 11 now. Oh, actually stay on this, sorry, 12. I think to not be confusing with math and to not get into this nitty gritty, I think that we should say an income level and then let us make sure we word the language right for the AMI. So based on what Jordan says, and again, we'll give everyone a chance to chime in. It sounds like that $39,000 range and under is what we are trying to target. So I think if it would be helpful if when we talk about AMI, not, you don't need to say 60, 80, let's say an income number, even though that's not what the ordinance will say, because I think that'll keep everyone focused instead of, you know, like let us draft the way and we'll explain it. But I guess if we go back to 11, is the under $39,000 a year and under the workforce that we're trying to attract? If we go back to slide 11 and then start getting everyone's consensus. I don't think we need to, you know, go every single person, but I think maybe speak up if that's not the case, or just give your input, because then that would be, again, we'll say the numbers of the AMI, but is that the income level of what you're thinking about to keep here?
I think 39,000 is good because it covers teachers, it covers most of the service industry. They would all qualify for that housing.
I agree. That's about $9 an hour or less.
Yep, I agree.
Anybody have any issues with this?
So, I mean, we can always go back, but I think that's good. The percentage, I think, so now that we're talking about the set aside, so I probably should have put that when we spoke about the threshold, but what percentage does everyone think should be set aside. So again, the person comes in, whether it's 5 or 10 units, whatever we require, we say they need to set aside how many units? 10% of their development, 12.5, which is an eighth, 25%, which not many places do, but Boulder does. Not to say that any places like Boulder, but I guess we can kind of get everyone give their input as to what percentage you think of that new development should be required to be set aside for the housing for people who make $39,000 or less.
Well, that goes back to the amount, when we look at the amount of the AMIers, those type of housing that we need. I mean, if you think about it, if somebody builds 30 units and we do 10%, that's only 3 units. Is that really going to provide the need of the community? But again, if we get higher, then it'll run developers away.
Well, like you're saying, like, I mean, where could even someone build a 30-unit place in this town? Right. So, I mean, that's the other thing. And like Nina said, we have the options that they can pay percentages in lieu. So, I mean, personally, I'm leaning towards Nina said that 5 units, 12.5% is pretty standard in mountain and small communities. That seems pretty reasonable, especially since there's some flexibility. They can pay a fee. They can do, Nina said there's a whole buffet of things they can do instead of actually making a unit.
Yeah, which we'll go over later, but yeah.
So let me just ask you this question, because Idaho Springs, unlike a Salida that I'm also very familiar with, is you don't have a lot of land in town. The developments that we're seeing are a little denser than what you've seen previously. So people are coming in and asking, for higher density. Do you think that you could scare away development, and is that okay with you?
Yep, sure is.
You could definitely scare away development, but I don't think 12.5% or 15% is too out of line.
I had to ask the question.
What did you say Boulders is? You referred to Boulder. I know we're not Boulder, but.
Boulder, it requires 25%. That's pretty steep compared to what other places do. Most places do 10, 12, 12.5, or 15%.
But do those
Maybe it should.
Are they developing 300 units?
I'm sorry?
30 units.
Well, again, you start with that threshold. Oh, well, Boulder actually has a growing scale. So, you're right. Boulder has, if it's this many units, but I don't recommend we get that complicated. Yeah. They do, like, if it's this many units, this percentage, or this many units, this percentage. I recommend that you guys just have a threshold. And then again, like, you have that flexibility on the back end. But just generally, if you're, what set aside would you want to include? Obviously, it can't be too high because you don't want to, again, even to Art's point, put the cost on everyone else, but then, and also only so much you could put onto the developer. So I do recommend staying in the standard amount.
We keep on thinking about the developer, but the whole conversation is generated by workforce housing. So we're kind of contradicting ourselves as we go forward. Somebody has to pay the burden. Is it going to be the workforce? Is it going to be the builders? I mean, you can't have it both ways, because you're either going to discourage the workforce if you don't have enough burden on the builders, and if you don't, and vice versa. So, I mean, we're kind of not really looking at that from that perspective. I mean, we got to get to a point where if a builder walks away, that's his or her problem. And if the workforce person can't afford it, then that's we're violating what we're trying to do. Am I mistaken?
No,
I understand. I think that it's good to, I mean, it's up to you guys, but I think it's good to stay in the range of what most places do, because then the builders are kind of used to that.
We're not most places, though. We don't have the land that most places have. So we do have a unique situation here. Somewhere along the line, somebody's going to come up and say, well, we got to be smart about this. There's only so many units we can put in the proper Idaho Springs. Some of them are going to have to stretch out to the county. And I don't know if we're discussing that or not. So we're very unique as you drive around to all these so-called mountain towns. the land is much flatter in a lot of places.
Oh, of
We-
course.
So I mean, I think there's a lot of things we're not talking about that we gotta consider, and maybe I'm pushing the cart before the horse. But I think there's gotta be some consideration of what and who Idaho Springs is and what we really want to accomplish, and use the landmass that we have to accomplish that. I'll be quiet, Mayor. I know what you're thinking.
I'm going.
No, actually, Art, I really agree with you because we only have so much land, and if we need a lot of workforce housing, does that mean we need to push for more because we're not going to have that many developments?
That's what we have to decide. This group, we have to decide what goal we really want to accomplish, and see how we can do it. It's not an easy task. Obviously, we're all
Right.
have different thoughts and ideas, but I think we're unique to a lot of communities, and I think there's a number that's we're going to have to come up with a number of units and who we want to satisfy, and how many residents do we think we can take in to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Art, I'm agreeing with you. That's why I'm leaning more towards the higher end of that at 15, because
I am too.
As Nina was saying, no matter what, we're not hardly going to put it in this, because there just is not room for that many more housing units to go into our community.
Right.
You know, it seems to me that it would be a really good idea to actually inventory what our land resources are, because we may be so constrained that this whole conversation may, not be that significant in the overall thing. And I know, Chuck, you have looked at all the city-owned land that we're going to be talking about soon, I believe. But to me, it's so limited. It's not an impossible thing, not even a big job, to inventory what we actually have. And I think that will maybe clear up a lot of this discussion, because I think it's going to be
And
extremely.
I want to remind people
I agree with you, Bob.
that Idaho Springs is unusual in that you have limited land, but you also have a high number of publicly owned parcels, either owned by the city, Chuck provided that information, or even the property owned by the school district. So I think, as Nina said earlier, tonight we're just looking at the inclusionary portion of this, but clearly there are other opportunities to make a dent in the housing needs.
The comprehensive plan does have a potential multifamily site map in it, and it needs to be modified, but it does have that work, at least preliminary work in that area done.
So do we want to just put, again, this could change, but it's not, since it's not really based on anything right now, put 15%, and obviously we'll bracket it, and it'll to move on to the next part of the ordinance, and then.
Yeah, Nina, I would suggest 15%.
Okay.
I agree.
Sounds good.
So two more, we don't need to do the chart if you go to the slide after that, Jonathan.
But you guys also got to keep in mind, if we're doing a higher number, 15%, are we lowering the town with just having everything at low income? I mean, you got to think about it is we wanted, the survey said diversity, we want more, we want high and middle and low. So are we making it just too much low and taking away from the development of the place that somebody wants the nicer home? Or
Well, that only be 15% of new stuff.
15.
From the study, I think we need a very low income and also high income, and it seems like we have plenty of neutral, medium.
Well, I think you could address that issue by making some areas available for the workforce, and then making some available for single family homes, and having it as a separate development. But once again, we're not talking about a lot of land. I don't know what the city owns, but maybe that's important to find out, like Bob said.
So,
So
out there, these percentages are not going to get what we need. it will help. What we're going to have to look at as a city is a second tax credit project, like the one we're doing on Colorado Boulevard. If we're really going to provide enough units for the amount of people that need them, that's how we're going to get it. We're not going to get what we need and the needs of this community through 15% or you know, anything like that. We're not going to have a 400 unit housing project at 10%, 15%, you know, to give us 40 to 50 units. It's not going to happen. I see the biggest project I could see. We'll take, for instance, so if the track over at the old high school gets developed on, there's been concepts of about 80 units over there. So 15% of 80 is 12 units. I mean, that's just a shot in the arm. It's not going to be a whole lot.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Thank you.
We're going to have a mixed type of projects.
But we have not, unless I missed it, we have not really determined what the number of the workforce people will be that we're trying to attract. We don't know what that number is.
67%. So just think of it this way, Art, 67% of the people living in Idaho Springs make under $75,000 a year.
Right.
So I think that gives you.
I think Ursula had showed how many people need, it was in those certain income levels.
Well, and John's presentation last time said that 35% make less than 35,000. So there's clearly a need for housing for that market.
Yes.
But those are the people that are here. That's the number that's here. I think what the mayor is referring to, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, is to grow that number to have more people here to fill the jobs that are necessarily to be filled. So are we trying to attract more people, or are we just trying to keep the people we have? You guys got me confused, because I'd like to know what we're trying to do is just satisfy the people that are here and help them.
No, I think you're doing both.
You're doing both.
Okay, you're doing both. And I'm saying, how many more people, what's that number that you want to increase to grow the city by the population?
We don't know that number because we don't know how many people businesses need.
That's my point. Well, we don't. So how can we talk about developments and units and all that stuff if we don't know what that number is?
Because we have to do something.
I mean,
there's definitely a need, and this would be just a dent, because what Ursula showed, the county did the studies, and it shows all.
But that was a county, and we can't absorb everything that the county, from county numbers. Some of this has to be a burden or a development, however you want to do it. The county has to participate in this too. If you're looking for more land and you want people to be close enough to Idaho Springs to work, or Georgetown, it can't all be in our small land mass that we have or don't have. It has to go on beyond that. That's all I'm trying to say.
And Art, if you remember at the last presentation, one of the things that I wanted to remind people is housing choice is blind to jurisdictional lines. So if I'm looking for a place to live, most people may not be aware of whether they're in the county or in the city. But I think, you know, what I see is that 95% occupancy on any kind of housing, you simply need more housing.
Well, we need to determine how much more and how much more can we handle, and the two numbers may not jive.
Jonathan?
There was a study done a year or two ago. It's called the Mass Economics Study, and I think it might have some of that information in it. We could take a look at it. It was done by the EDC, I think it does break down some of these needs that you're discussing right now. And of course, it's always going to be context sensitive because things change and operations of businesses change, and nobody ever has always 20 employees in service industry. But I do think that there may be a possibility that we could look at some of those numbers and maybe report back if they're there.
So if we, this is my last slide for the inclusionary housing ordinance, so I can button it up because I feel like I have a really good direction to draft this. And this is one very small piece in the conversation. And I know after this slide, we're going to talk about other equations, but I feel that the mayor and Andy wanted to make sure we made good use of your time, that after this discussion, we can draft an ordinance that then you discuss in front of council. And then of course, like I said, this is one small piece, but this is the last slide in terms of like what I'm trying to collect from everyone to draft this ordinance, which will be on city council agenda shortly. This is the options to meet the inclusionary housing requirements. So in other words, we went through everything, if it's X amount of units, you have this requirement to set aside this many units. Then the ordinance will also include what other options or flexibility or hybrid of options can the developer or builder meet for this ordinance. So there's what we already spoke about, then there's these other options. I want to see just generally how everyone feels, but I'll explain them all and then we can talk. Providing the affordable units on the site, which is what we spoke about. The other options that we can add are dedicating off-site. So a lot of times this happens if the person maybe is developing 2 sites and they kind of make an exchange. So that would be specific in the code, but this is just to make it general. Sometimes they want to take a percentage of their land and donate that part of the land to a nonprofit housing developer, and they say, we don't want to deal with it, let them deal with it, but here's the land. Or can they dedicate vacant lands for unit development? So either dedicate to the city or to a nonprofit housing development. And then right now we need to have a fee in lieu. And we don't need to go into the specifics of how we calculate that. I just gave an example, but this is just one option that we would have in the ordinance as to how the person can, or the company can meet these requirements if they cannot meet or do not want to meet the set aside. So a lot of ordinances have all these options, but I just wanted to see how everyone felt about them.
When you say dedicate land, affordable, vacant land, then the land could sit there for a long time and not get developed.
That we would be dedicated to either the city or a non-for-profit housing developer who it has to be a specific dedication it could be someone that we approve, the city approves. So the way we have it in another city is that it's either the city or a nonprofit housing developer that we approve at the time. So that's someone who's ready, that's their goal and mission to own that house. So it can't just be.
That's a pretty complex choice, actually, when you look at, utility availability, grade, everything. To me, that one is a little bit of a dicey one, to tell you the truth.
And probably for Idaho Springs, you're right. So I agree with that. So that I understand. So we could take it out and then that cannot be included.
Nina, I have a question. Does the city get to pick which option the developer uses, or does the developer get to pick?
It's a negotiation with the city. So they would come in and we would go through it with them. One way is what we alluded to before, is if the numbers don't work out, are they doing a unit, or are they doing, like if the math doesn't work out in terms of half a unit, these are options that they are allowed to choose. So if we don't like any of if we don't like a certain option, for example, 3, I'm probably not going to include that in the ordinance. So if you don't like an option, don't put it on the table for the property owner or developer to consider. But it's a negotiation and it's allowing them to choose.
Let me ask the question this way. Chuck Hammond provided everyone with a list of, I guess, 70 properties that the city owns. So the question, and back to Cindy's point, does the city need any more vacant land? Yes or no?
Well, I would have to.
If
I
it's a
would have,
negotiation, I would assume that, you know, the city can decide if they want to or not.
Yeah, I agree with Bob and Cindy in taking out the vacant land option, but the rest seem like it's a negotiation, so might as well.
I don't
So
really
in turn,
see
oh,
why-
I'm sorry, it would be 4. We're talking about the vacant land. We're not talking about on-site. So I believe that what we're saying is we don't like the option to develop, to dedicate vacant land.
I would prefer to leave all the options available and let the city negotiate whatever's more convenient for them.
I guess part of my question on the vacant land thing, which didn't really get answered, is, okay, so you have the vacant land, and when you're negotiating this, does the developer need to have somebody that's there standing ready to develop that like vacant land right away, or is it something that could sit there for years?
So
Or
the first,
would it-
the first thing you said, so it would be drafted in a way that it would say, the city must approve of who they're dedicating it to. So, and it would, if there's a not-for-profit that we know is very active and working right now and is going to develop, then that land would go to there. They couldn't just randomly dedicate it to someone at the time that we don't approve of. That's how it would be drafted.
But the possibility exists that that might not get developed right away, or it might not get developed for a long time, right?
No, I mean, it doesn't work that way practically because the city at the time is going to approve, and it's going to be that housing, the housing developer, the not-for-profit that is in your county that is really passionate about this and is not going to hold on to the land just to not develop it. So it would be at the time of the negotiation that the city would know that that development, that the developer is ready.
So they're kind of coming in with a package saying, we're gonna do the vacant land option, and here's the person that's gonna develop that.
Yeah, and you know, penalties can be imposed if something doesn't happen.
Right,
by
and
a
deed
certain-
restrictions and all that, yeah. And I help my clients draft all those kind of things to ensure that that doesn't happen. The issue that, it's a good question, Cindy, but we make sure we draft it in a certain way. Maybe it reverts back to the city after a year if it's not developed and we give it to someone else. Make sure of all those things.
So I would say leave it in there because they're gonna have to have a plan in place. And then like Bob said, that could be the next step. If they fall through, they're penalized.
Yeah, I agree with Cindy. With that clarification, might as well leave all the options on the table.
Right.
The city will determine. I don't think that's a likely scenario, but if there is a scenario
Right.
like that, we'll have to put it.
Okay, so I feel good about what everyone's saying in terms of drafting an initial ordinance on this to be in front of city council, and then you could have further obviously discussion, debate. This is nothing final, but in terms of putting something that could be in front of you, I do feel like I have direction. And then anyone could add on to anything else they want to say, or if we want to move on to other options, or like button this up. This is going to be presented to city council, and then talk about other options that there are to deal with this issue.
I have a question about, you had the table about how you determine rents. How is that rent regulated on an ongoing basis moving forward? If a developer, 10 years after the development takes place, how does someone make sure they're still charging the lower income rent to someone?
There's deed restrictions on it, and then there's also different deed restriction is the way you would go about it, but who's going to follow up? There's different in different cities, we have different either counties or things that are set up for following through with that. I think to answer your question, it's a permanent restriction on the deed, whether it be or the development agreement with the city, whether it be rental or ownership.
So
But there's
Scott,
different ways of the
good
practicalities.
news- The good news, and I think what people learned over many years, is that by putting it on the deed and the title, if I were to buy a property, I would look at that title commitment deed and
Yep.
see that it was deed restricted.
Right, and it would be like this, maybe the city has to approve of the deed or something with the language that that we draft and make sure that it's in there.
but it doesn't go away.
If it's, I can understand if it's deed restricted, but 10 years after the development takes place, who's checking on that landlord to make sure he's charging the right rent or he's charging it to the lower
It could
income
be
people?
report. Yeah, that's a good question. In our ordinance, we have reporting requirements to the city. There's different ways. I'll make note to make sure of that, to put that requirement in. To address that.
And then the other question I have is, my understanding is if this was a development and these units were sold, again, you'd probably have a deed restriction in there. But how is that price determined for a sales price? Because you had a table for rentals, but if a person wanted to sell and 15% of this housing had to be to the lower income people, how is that sales price determined?
So that would also be addressed in the deed. There would be a deed restriction. So it would either be the person just gets their equity back and then they need to sell it for that amount that is then affordable for that new person. So let's say they purchased it for $200,000 and then they they pay down the equity or some of the equity, let's say 10 years down the line, it would need to be sold for 60. What is affordable for someone making 60% AMI, which would be very objective in those charts. So again, I know you only saw the rental chart, but there's a similar calculation can be done, is done based on the AMI at that time.
Is it
So the
30% of their income kind of a figure like the rent was figured? 30%
Yeah,
of your mortgage
is what
to
someone,
your annual
well,
income.
no, there's a whole, it's a little more complex than that, but it's whatever the mortgage compounds to, right? So their monthly mortgage, but there would be a specific number of what that person could afford. So let's say with inflation, it's 220,000. The person can't sell it for more than that amount. And it's not like I'm picking the numbers out of a hat there on the chart for whatever someone's making 60% of the AMI at the time would be able to afford. So the mortgage.
Which leads me into more questions, which I want to leave for another time, but I see a developer, if he's going to sell units, he's going to make that a lower grade unit compared to some of the other ones that might sell for more. So
That's
he's
a good question.
lesser finishes in there.
Right.
Well, that's a good question, but we would make sure of that in the ordinance. So I'm writing down all of these requirements. Some ordinances have the requirement. It must be the same as all the other units.
But then like Art says, you're going to pass forward his profits to something else, and who's going to end up paying for that? The other people buying the other units. That's what we got to be careful of.
The Salida document is very detailed about all those.
Yep. Yeah, we thought about all that. So, but actually it's good, Scott, that I really appreciate you reminding, because maybe it sounds like you guys would want to have more reporting requirements to make sure down the line. But definitely we'll make sure that all the units are the same, like it's not a lower grade. It's but that it's a good reminder that you're saying this, so we make sure that that's important and make sure that's in the ordinance.
Is there also, Nina, anything in the ordinance about property maintenance over time, sort of to tag on to Scott's question?
In terms of who, the landlord?
Yeah, so you have, so I'm the developer, I just developed 10 units, a certain percentage is affordable. What happens if they fall into disrepair?
All of the units or just the affordable?
And anything, I mean, is there?
Because that's just basic, that's just any other development that could happen too. So it would be whatever happens, I know I think maybe you're thinking of like when you have a housing development for like all affordable, but that would be similar to anything that we could do. It's not much to keep up for any development. So if there's any development in the city that falls into disrepair, there's only, maybe for annexations, we have more flexibility of making certain requirements, but.
Yeah, the city does not have any property maintenance requirements. I don't know if it's an issue.
Right. So I'm just, making the analogy of it's like any other development that the economy goes to the ground and taking away the inclusionary housing and a certain building just you know, that's, it's just whatever would happen in the regular course of everything.
Any other direction you want to provide to Nina on this inclusionary ordinance?
I think it's a really good start, actually.
I think so, yeah. I think I have got good guidance, and again, it's nothing, it's just to make a draft. I think that we can button this up and this will be in front of the council. I think I have enough direction, and obviously if you think of anything, let us, one of us know, but it's also, it will be the normal course of, now it'll be a draft ordinance that you'll be negotiating, debating about. So I appreciate this, and I appreciate everyone, and I'll give it over to Barb to go to any next topics, and you'll see I'll talk to Andy, Andy and the mayor about putting this on the, whatever agenda they say for you to consider.
One thing I want to point out is in this material that we received, it said that Chaffee County, and this is from 2016, so I don't know where it's gone, but that they recommended building 27 new units every year for 10 years throughout the whole county. And they recommended that out of these 27 units, that 17 of those units would be priced for people making 60% or less of the area median income.
Oh, that's good. That's helpful.
So is that transpiring? And 17 units out of 27 is a lot larger than the 15% we're talking about.
The need is greater than what we're doing. This is just a like one tool of many.
No, that's not the question. I'm asking that in 2016, this was the recommended building for.
Oh, someone's doing the math.
And I'm wondering if any of that went forward in that county of them building 27 new units every year.
Oh God, probably not, but maybe Jonathan can answer, or Andy.
Are you asking that?
I'm guessing there's most housing needs. They not built, but maybe Chaffey County is different. Maybe you could tell me if they have hit those numbers that were needed. Probably not.
I guess my point now is that they do it. My point is the recommendation was for every 27 units built, 17 of them should be priced for 60% or lower as far as the area median. What I'm getting at is we were talking about 15% being.
Got it.
17% is a larger percentage. What 17%? Okay, that's my point. So I don't
right.
know
So yeah, that's about what that's like about 80%. But we can, yeah, I understand what you're saying. There's only so much you could.
I personally, I don't think there's any way that could have happened.
Well, that's what I mean.
You might get it done on one, but every year for 10 years, I mean, I just don't see that much charitable, housing. That would be a very disproportional number of low income units.
I agree 100%. That's the point I'm trying to bring up. And let's remember that county has over 20,000 people in the population in 2017, and we're at 9,700 or something like that, community countywide. So I'm just trying to tie in the numbers in to what we have compared to what other people have population wise, land mass, and all those other things.
Yeah.
Trying to get the whole picture.
Okay. So any final comments, other things you want staff to look at, or are we good to go?
I have one more question. If the ordinance did get accepted, to change it, if there was something to be found that we didn't agree, we wasn't working, or we wanted to change, you can always change the ordinance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it would be whenever you change the ordinance, it would be for anything going forward. But yeah, definitely, I would in some sense maybe such a thing, set a goal every year, every 2 years once it's implemented to see how it's working for you. Is it working? What parts are not working? Definitely. And not to mention also there's state legislation that I referred to a couple weeks ago that if passes gives us a little bit more that we can do and maybe have less options because, but that's a whole other story. But we always keep track of, our firm always keeps track of state legislation and then recommends, taking that in consideration with amending ordinances.
All right. I guess this is the end. Would anybody else like to make any comments or give Nina any other additional information that we might want to include in this document? And remember, she's going to prepare an ordinance for first reading. First reading, and we've got plenty of time between first and second reading, you know, to tweak and make changes and really come up with a document that we want to put into our to our city.
And then if you guys want to talk about anything else, like I think we buttoned up the inclusionary housing, but if there's anything else that you want to be the next topic or anything else, it's up to you.
Okay. Man, a lot tonight. That's okay. Okay. Anything else before we adjourn? Really not a meeting. It's pretty laid back. Good work, everybody. Great conversation. You know,
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed our last housing meeting, and this one I actually got an email from one of our community members that was really pleased that we did this and put it out public, and so that the community had the opportunity to what we were talking about and what the city council and planning commission was proposing for our community moving forward. So it was nice to get that email in support of the things we're doing. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk.
Thank you.
Have a nice Labor Day, everyone.
Thank you, Nina.
Thanks, Nina. Good job.
Thanks, Nina.